Hello and welcome to episode 33 of the Adamola Bookman podcast. My name's Al Bond. I'm here with John Coughlin. Hi, Johnny.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
I'm great, fella. And this week we are doing In Search of Duncan Ferguson by Alan Patullo. What did you think about Duncan Ferguson before you read this book, Johnny? I mean, what did you know about him?
I didn't realise he was so absolutely adored. I know that Everton fans liked him. I wasn't aware of the depth of that feeling. And what did I know about him? Yeah, I'd have like rough, decent, kind of a handful. But he's not Alan Shearer, is he? He was around for years when I was watching football religiously as a young fella. But I don't think he'd have all that much of an impression on me, to be honest.
I think so too, Johnny. That's what I thought as well. For many, you think of headers, you think of burglars, you probably think of prison. I didn't realise how crap he was. I thought he was better than he was. I really thought he was way better. His stats are really mediocre, really mediocre.
If you'd asked me how many times he played for Scotland, I wouldn't have said 7.
And if you'd asked me how many goals he'd scored for Scotland, I wouldn't have said none. It's wild. Honestly, if you'd asked me what was Duncan Ferguson's Scotland record, I would have said like 40 caps and like 17 goals. I think that's what I would have guessed at. Somewhere along there. Yeah, really much more mediocre player than I was led to believe. A lot of that's due to injury, right? He was injured all the time.
Was it though? Okay, so we know what you think about what you thought of him before the book. Now, what do you think of him?
Yeah, I don't like him very much, to be honest. I don't like him at all. It seems to be a deeply charmless fella. People try and claim this lack of charm. Well, I think the last line in the book is "I'm shy." I don't think he's that shy. He's just kind of mean.
He seems like an asshole.
Yeah, he does. He really does.
I tell you who finds him very charming, the author of this book.
How do you feel about the author of this book?
Like a snivelling little weasel.
Okay.
I know, I'm only joking, but I just didn't get it. The book is well written. He seems like a nice fella and all the rest of it, but I fundamentally didn't understand his interest in Duncan Ferguson.
I think of all the books we've covered, this is the most provincial. Alan Patullo is genuinely impressed by Liverpool as a big city. He's hit the big time now. He's off to Liverpool. He just genuinely does. There's one part which I thought was very telling. And he's talking about Dundee United, which is where Duncan Ferguson started his career. And he's like, Dundee United scouting tentacles stretched far and wide, even to the west of Scotland. And I was like, to the west of Scotland even? From Dundee? Oh la la, look at that. They really are a global operation. And he really, he wrote that and he believed that line. And I just thought, it's kind of sweet. Yeah, it's very the man was born in Dundee, and I think the reason being so was Big Dunk in Bannockburn.
So we both read this book on Kindle. So you know what percentage of the book is dedicated to his time at Dundee?
It's a very large part of the book.
It's the first third of the book. Did this guy ever play in England? I just thought we'd never get past this Dundee thing.
I didn't mind it so much, Johnny. I've got to tell you, again, this is a question of the author having zero access to Duncan Ferguson. There's one point where he even doorsteps his mum and dad and they're just hiding out in the living room, not coming to him. Because of that, he really has to focus on some of the more peripheral characters. I mean, this is basically the big Duncan Ferguson and Jim McLean with a starring, I don't know if you have a person who just keeps popping up, Christian Daly. Hello, it's Christian Daly again. Hello, Christian. And I think, again, the author, it being quite provincial, really has he imagines that we're going to have massive reverence for Christian Daly every time he pops up. He's like, the small matter of a Christian Daly was playing on the other side. It's like, we're in trouble now. It's Christian Daly. I mean, he loves Christian Daly. He's everywhere, all over this book. I don't think he gets a line, but he appears all the time. Yeah, and the big character in this book is Jim McLean, the Dundee United manager, who, frankly, I would read a biography of.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. His whatever million years at Dundee United came to an end when he punched a journalist.
That's the way to go, isn't it, Johnny? That's the way to go.
I enjoyed this book. I did, but I don't like Duncan Ferguson.
No,
And I,
I agree with you 100% there. I also enjoyed this book more than I expected to. I enjoyed the author's writing style. I quite liked his sniveling little worm personas. He's like creeping about trying to get access to people. But I thought that was very enjoyable. But yeah, Duncan Ferguson is a deeply charmless man.
but this is the thing about the author. He inserts charm where there is silence. And, this is what you see with monarchs who don't say anything. People start to attach personality to them with no basis.
That is absolutely true. Yeah, he does find a lot of good in Duncan Ferguson where I just couldn't see it at all. I mean, he wrote back to a few people who wrote to him in prison. That was nice of him. Occasionally, he might turn up to a dinner in his honor, but there's a very good chance he might not as well. Fundraising things with him attached, forget about it. Yeah, couldn't care less.
Couldn't care less. This is a fella who was good at something from a young age, and it maybe turned him into just a bit of a dick. Maybe everything came too easy to this lad.
Well, that's it. I mean, that the other salient point about this book is that he doesn't really like football, does he?
Well, that's funny because he doesn't like football for as long as it's a big part of his life, and there's all of this massive circus around him that I had no idea existed. But when football moves on, when football moved on from him, which it inevitably does for everyone, then he's suddenly interested in football at the end of the book when he doesn't really have anything else.
I mean, I'm just thinking financial issues, Johnny. That's all I was thinking there. He must need money. He seems to be so indifferent to it. All of a sudden, he's popped back like, "Oh, I will shake your hand, David Moyes, if you just give me a job."
Okay, let's get into this book.
So predictably enough, as must be the case with all biographies, we start with the lowest of the low, don't we? He's leaving prison. He's leaving Berlin jail in Glasgow after 6 weeks. We've heard a lot about his trousers, haven't we, Johnny? We know all about his trousers in prison. They were too short, folks. Too short.
After the Bella Gutman stuff, I don't mean to be unkind. I'd say it was absolutely rotten. But, it's a bit different, isn't it?
In the first page, it says, "So this is what it feels like. Freedom." He'd been locked up for 44 days. 44 days. I mean, exactly. After the Bella Gutman, I'm so much more comfortable with this, though, Johnny. But yeah, after the Bella Gutman, it's really nothing. He got picked up by a Daimler, and then Everton put on a fucking bagpipe band for him when he returned from jail. So classy touch there, Everton.
Yeah, so sorry, it starts with this whole prison thing, but we go back to the prison thing again later. So he grew up in Bannockburn, and this is where Robert the Bruce defeated King Edward II to secure an independent monarch for Scotland. It's right on the edge of Stirling.
So Duncan's father is a big part of his life, although we learn absolutely nothing about him, although apparently he is pretty much an ever-present. He's always with Duncan, certainly in negotiations, but I cannot stress enough, we know nothing about Duncan Ferguson's dad.
He picks a fight with Jim McLean at one point at Dundee United, and the impression you get from when the author goes to the home place is he's a scary character, I gather, Ferguson's father.
I believe that. But yeah, absolutely, totally intimidating, which is, I guess, where Big Dunk gets it from.
And this is where you got this love of pigeons, which I guess is something that Ferguson is famous for. And it's mentioned so many times in the book, but he never actually goes into it. I kind of would have been interested to hear about that, because what is it exactly that people do with pigeons?
Well, that's it. He does. He specifies at one point that he has a friend who has show pigeons. Now that doesn't sound like a great event, does it? Like, look at that one. That's a smashing looking fella. Look at that one. Lovely. Is any good at racing? This is a show pigeon. It doesn't race. Just for show. But he had racing pigeons. But yeah, there's no precious little racing from the pigeons. Yeah, I wouldn't have minded hearing a little bit about that.
Yeah. How many pigeons do you have? What do you do? What do they eat? Where do you send them? How long does it take? When do they come back? And like,
Well,
do they?
considering this is the thing that apparently Duncan Ferguson loves more than his own children, like when he's in prison, he's like, what'd you miss? Oh, the pigeons. Oh, my lovely pigeons. He didn't have children when he was in prison. So I'm not saying that. But yeah, we hear very little about the pigeons and we hear very little about his dad.
And nothing about his mother. Like literally nothing about his mother.
Yeah, almost to the point where he's been like scared off or something. Like someone's had a word with the authors, like, don't write about Duncan's mum at all.
If you think his father is scary.
Yeah, the author is back in Stirling, which Bannockburn is a part of. And I think it's interesting that the author is astonished that there's no sign of that this is the birthplace of Duncan Ferguson. Like, there's no statue, there's no monument to Duncan Ferguson. It's like, what the fuck did you expect? He's scored 68 goals. That's it. 68 over 15 seasons. What did they think? A big, massive statue of Duncan Ferguson. Look at this lad. He's the highest scoring Scottishman in the Premier League. Oh, that's astonishing, isn't it? 68's high enough for that.
Behold Ferguson, he had 7 caps for Scotland.
Yeah, he never hit double figures after he played for Dundee United in the league.
He played an average of 30 games a season over the course of his career.
It's incredible his status in the game, considering how mediocre his output was.
In terms of the kind of criminal element, he's kind of comparable to Joey Barton on some level, no?
I mean, he gets described as a thug, and I think that's deserved enough. Although, to jump ahead, I do think the prison sentence for the headbutt was bullshit. Absolute nonsense.
Fucking crazy, but we can come back to that in a minute. But he's, whatever with that, but he was constantly assaulting people in his day-to-day life. And there's no doubt that he was getting hassle from people, but everybody in that world must get hassle from people, you know? So,
I mean, I know this is in the 90s. I know it's a long time ago, but he headbutts a policeman, for which he receives a fine of £125. Don't do it again. Why not? But seeing as the only thing that's going to happen is to get fined 125 quid, why not? I mean, okay, even if that's 500 quid now, you try headbutting a policeman in America, Johnny. See where that gets you.
The name of the book is Searching for Duncan Ferguson. And I think he is a genius of public relations insofar as he never bothered with them. So people just had to kind of fill in the blanks. And he is this legendary character just because he never allowed anyone in to get to know him. And I think there is a lesson out there for people, you know, just don't give anything away and people will make it up for themselves and they'll just fill in the blanks to your benefit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. As long as you keep hitting 1 in 4. At this stage, he was the most sent-off player in Premier League history as well, wasn't he?
For a striker now. There's no excuse. Anyway, okay, let's get back to the book. He signs for Dundee United and he's playing under the authoritarian Jim McLean.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this guy's a tyrant. But equally, look at where Dundee United were in the 1980s. My God, part of Europe's elite. You can't argue with his methods, can you?
Well, I guess you can't argue with his results, right? I did like this. He sent Ferguson with 2 other players to paint a wall for whatever infraction of the rules that they had committed, and they wrote Jim McLean as a cunt on the wall.
Yep, it's inventive stuff, isn't it? Well done, lads.
Yeah,
and so some little rat goes chasing off to get Jim McLean as well. Like, hey, look what they've done here, Jim. What they've said about you? Look, who was it? That worm is named in the book as well. I don't have it to hand, but yeah, the worm is named as running off to go and tell Jim McLean. But apparently, even Jim McLean couldn't stop himself from laughing at such a funny prank.
But so I would share Jim McLean's view of Ferguson. Ferguson had this. Jim McLean doesn't like Ferguson, and he doesn't like him from the start. And he doesn't even say that Ferguson was, the best player that I think he had played for him. He names other players who he thought was better. But his problem with Ferguson was that Ferguson had talent, and he just did nothing with it. And he was saying that to him as a 20-year-old. And that just continues to be Ferguson for the rest of his career.
Well, that's right. McLean says to him, "You just don't love the game as much as I do." And that must be heartbreaking for a footballer who's given his whole life. And you see this kid, probably the best he's had, right? And the kid just doesn't care enough, lazes off, always slacks off in training when he can be
Yeah,
bothered to turn up. It must be very, very frustrating for him.
yeah, absolutely. At some point, when he plays for Everton, one of his teammates is Kevin Kilbane. And Kilbane was such a kind of a figure of fun for a long time in Ireland, but then he became quite liked over time. And there's a guy who just worked so hard, just so hard. The likes of Ferguson just must make him want to vomit.
Well, absolutely right. And let's not underestimate how good he could have been, because according to one of our previous autobiography subjects, Neville Southall, Duncan Ferguson could have been the best player in the whole world. No one better than him in the world. Even the author said he spluttered at that. He spluttered and went, "Yeah, you sure about that, Neville?" Yes.
Yeah, come on. I like Neville Southall, but that was a bit of a bridge too far from Neville.
My favourite line in the book was this. Normally his uncle would drive him to football match. Oh, by the way, his uncle was a deaf goalkeeper in the Scottish League.
That is incredible.
My favourite line in the whole book is there's a big game for cars, and Duncan Ferguson's uncle's car turns up, and then someone shouts out, "Look, there's Duncan's uncle's car, but there's no Duncan." Love that line. Duncan's uncle's car there, but there's no Duncan. Oh no. Lovely.
So this digs that he lived in, this was in Dundee, or was it? That was
Oh,
at
baby.
Rangers. Was that at
Can you hear
Rangers?
me rubbing my hands together, folks? Yeah, lovely stuff. He's just got himself an agent. He gets put in digs, and he doesn't like his digs. He reckons he's cold. He doesn't have enough blankets. He tells his agent. His agent passes that on to the press. The landlord and landlady of the house he's staying at are deeply upset and offended, and the landlord dies 4 days later from a heart attack from the stress of it. But don't worry, Duncan did send some flowers to his funeral, though. You fucking asshole.
Should I go? Nah, flowers would be enough, right?
I bet you any money, Johnny, that the flowers were not his idea. I bet you all the money in the world that they were not his idea. I bet you he didn't sign the card. I bet you had nothing to do with any of it.
The author just thinks it's so touching that he did send flowers to the man he undoubtedly killed.
In a snapshot of his time as well, it describes Duncan Ferguson as owning a Capri with a funny horn, which goes on as long as it takes him to drive down the street. Oh, mate, I can picture that. A lovely Capri. Even when I was a kid, I knew Capris were for wankers.
I would know Caprino if it drove over me too.
Yeah, that's me 8 years on you, Johnny, there. They were a thing when I was a kid. Yes, as at Dundee, he really was in this pitched battle with this Jim McLean. He spent more time fixing benches and painting walls than he did playing football because he was always in trouble with the management.
But then there's this whispers, always coming back to the author. Oh, he's so close to the groundsman, but he never speaks to any of the groundsmen to confirm any of this. It's all second and third hand. What we have is the historical fact of Duncan Ferguson being a right bastard at times, and just whispers of him being decent.
You're absolutely right. All the tales of him being awful are confirmed by many people. He says at one point he spoke to a Scottish international. He says, "I can't speak about him because I've got nothing positive to say at all."
And you know what I think does come across from Ferguson is at various points he feels really, really hard done by. Really hard done by. With Moyes later, with the Scottish Football Association. That even manages to kind of, I think, get across this massive gap in information. We don't have the details, but you can still sense that this guy is... It reminded me a bit of Keane, Roy that is, and his kind of incandescent sense of injustice sometimes, of things done towards him. That was kind of the vibe I was getting from Ferguson as well.
But it's acceptable with Keane because he did give his all. He,
Well, yeah.
if he was complaining, he was giving himself 100%, whereas Duncan Ferguson was operating at 25, 30% all throughout his career. There's a point where
Yeah,
Gary Neville says, like, the Man United defenders just didn't really kick him or mark him very hard because as long as you didn't do that, he wouldn't play. The only way you could get him going was if you like managed to get him wound up. It's astonishing his lack of interest in football. He plays a Scotland under 21 game, right? And he just tells the manager, I can't really be bothered with a friendly.
that wasn't under 21. That was the full team. That was against Canada and the US, was it?
Oh, that's absolutely right. Yeah, you're quite right.
He says it's 2 weeks before the Euros in 1992. He's the youngest person in the squad, and they put him out to play against the US. It might be Canada, sorry. The US or Canada. And he doesn't try a leg, as they say. And then the Scotland manager at the time, his name is Andy Roxbury, his style was to go around every player in the dressing room and give them essentially a rating, good or bad, you know. And I got to Ferguson, he was like, what are you doing out there? You're not trying a leg. And I was like, yeah, I can't really get up for these friendlies.
Yeah, this is a direct quote from Roxburgh. His enthusiasm seemed to fluctuate depending on the circumstances. Great wordsmiths, these old Scottish football guys. I was very impressed with a lot of turns of phrase from some of these old Scottish blokes, your Craig Browns and the like, and that was a
Yeah.
nice one. His
Yeah.
enthusiasm certainly did fluctuate.
Yeah,
And
like I don't know.
the other damning thing about his Scotland career, Johnny, sorry to, is there is about 4 pages of him hitting the bar in a
Oh, come
Scotland
on.
game. It's wild. Like, oh, what a goal it would have been. Oh, if that goal had gone in, wowee. It didn't go in. He missed. It didn't go in. There's like 4 pages of it. Oh, his Scotland career could have been so different. It wouldn't have been different because he didn't give a shit.
But, and even the author says that there's this great myth about his scissors kick that hit the bar. It was against Germany, right? But then when he went back and he found the tape, it didn't hit the bar. The goalie saved it. You know, like the whole thing had changed. Like a myth had really developed around this, as you say, kind of missed shot. Yeah,
Yeah,
God,
and he does bring silence. He went to Euro 92. Scotland went to Euro 92. There's barely a mention of it. He played 12 minutes. He didn't do anything. Manager didn't fancy him, and you wouldn't. And these failings here are just not picked up on. He should be ashamed of himself.
yeah. Like, can you think of another player who has, if he has the talent that Neville Southall claims that he has, and Neville Southall may have been kind of the most extreme in that, but he's far from the only one who says things like that. Are there other players that spring to mind who've kind of essentially just wasted their talent to the extent that Ferguson seems to have done?
I mean, jumping David Bentley, a character like that, just wasn't that bothered, didn't really like football that much. I mean, that's perfectly fine, right? You don't have to, but when you take so much out of it and you're so bad-tempered about it.
That's the thing about Ferguson. Would it have meant much to him if he had succeeded where he didn't succeed? I'm not sure. According to this book, he is absolutely beloved by Everton fans and is a total legend by not doing very much.
Yeah, by not doing very much. Just by being, well, I mean, I get it. A big, aggressive striker is, I can see his appeal, but you're absolutely right. And then they say he also went like 10 Merseyside derbies without losing. So he sort of got a talisman thing. Not that he was scoring many goals in those derbies. Picked up the odd one. Yeah, it is difficult, really. You need an Everton fan from the time, really, to pinpoint exactly why he was so loved, because it is difficult to understand why.
And I think of when United had Ibrahimovic and everything was centred around him and he was scoring goals. And this happened when Ronaldo came back as well. He was scoring goals, but the team was shit as a result of how they had to play in order to accommodate them. So in the case of Ferguson, he's scoring 1 and 4, as you say, throughout his career. And apparently he's quite good with his feet, but very good with his feet. But by dint of being tall, there's a tendency to give it, long, give it high to players like that. So with this fairly mediocre return, it would have also transformed how they played as a team. So I think it was a bad deal for Everton, honestly.
Well, yeah, I mean, if they ever were a school of science, they certainly weren't by the time Ferguson had finished with them.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Maybe he's responsible.
Well, anyway, quickly jumping back. So before he joins Everton, he goes to Rangers, and at one point he is the most expensive British player. He's a £4 million player, more expensive than Roy Keane, more expensive than Shearer. But it would not be unfair to say that his spell at Rangers is about as bad as any spell has anyone ever had at any team ever. He is an unmitigated disaster.
Yeah.
Right from the get-go. Apparently he turns up and he tells them, and this is a team that's operating in the Champions League. They're the best team in Scotland by a mile. He turns up, I'm going to take you to the next level now, lads. And that's just red flag to a bull for old Mark Hateley, where in fact he doesn't take them into the next level. He doesn't get in the team, but what he does get is a prison sentence. Oh, baby.
Yeah. The prison stuff.
Okay, let's get this done with. I think the funniest thing about it, sorry if I can, is they had very little access to Duncan Ferguson. They say at one point when he's at Everton, they just put him on Club Call, the old premium number. And they've never made more money because people just wanted to hear what his voice sounded like. Everyone rang up just to hear what Duncan Ferguson had to say. But after the game in which he headbutts Jock McStay,
Great name.
he headbutts Jock McStay, they have, Rangers TV have access to him. And there's not being much made of a headbutt at this time. So there's him going, I hope you're proud of me, Dad. I'm playing for Rangers. So the next day in the newspapers, the only quote they've got is good old Duncan Ferguson saying, I hope you're proud of me, Dad. After he's headbutted a bloke, he's lying on the ground and he's going to go to prison. Oh, it's a good story.
But it's just insane. Did you watch video of the headbutt?
Yeah, I did.
How many times have you seen that on a football pitch?
Yeah, 100. I really, that was absolutely nuts, wasn't it? I mean, just he leaned into him, and he didn't suffer. He didn't suffer a bad. He got a cut lip. He had a cut lip.
Like Eric Cantona jumped over the hoarding and kicked a fella at a match, and didn't go to prison. It's just daft. It's daft that firstly, you could separate the Cantona thing because he broke the fourth wall or whatever, but in terms of anything that it would have, it's not that I'm saying that the law should never apply on a football field, but it would have to be something particularly heinous, and this wasn't a heinous act.
So the guy that Cantona was kicked was Matthew Simmons. And don't you feel that Jock McStay has some real Matthew Simmons energy? Like, Jock McStay, oh, mate, everything that was wrong with his life was all because of that. There's one quote. Raith were relegated by 9 points that season. Raith was the team that Josh McStay played for. And that was the days of 2 points for a win as well. So 4.5 wins. Ferguson had been sent off. Who knows what would have happened? Yeah, you still wouldn't have stayed up. Definitely, Ferguson had been sent off. Somehow you would have won 5 more games. Absolutely. He is not a very sympathetic character. He blames everything on his failure to really make a mark in football.
Do you know what was funny though? When they played later in the season in a reserve game and Ferguson elbowed him again.
I know. That was wild, wasn't it? I'm surprised that's not better known. I'm surprised there's not footage of that.
Well, it was in a reserve game, I think. So it was a reserve game. So I guess there's no footage. But we're agreed, right? It just absolutely bonkers. How could they send a fella to prison for that? In a single day of football in Britain, professional football, any single full Saturday, that must happen every week.
He was careless with his head, quite literally. That was the quote attributed to him, and that was true. He turned around. I'm not saying it wasn't aggressive, but as you say, it happens 100 times. The fella wasn't particularly hurt. He just leaned his head into him. Yeah, it was a nonsense. Yeah, it's incredibly ended up in prison. And they talk about maybe if he'd been sent off, he wouldn't have ended up in prison. I don't know how they managed to come up with that decision. It really was peculiar, wasn't it?
And then why did they do that and then not continue to literally police football for evermore afterwards? I just don't get it.
Yeah, do you remember Ben Thatcher on that? Was it Pedro Mendes? My God, do you remember that elbow? Genuinely could have killed him.
Like Roy Keane on Alfie Haaland, and any number of like heinous things happen on a
Hey, mate,
football
that
pitch.
Millwall keeper at the weekend on old
Right.
Jean-Philippe Mateta. Yeah.
Yeah.
Off to prison you go, all of you, for sure, if that's the benchmark.
Beside VAR, there's just a bank of policemen. You know? We're going to have to send this one upstairs to the Scotland Yard boys, you know?
He can rightly feel hard done by for ending up in prison. It sounds like the Scottish FA were just a bit of an old boys club at the time, doesn't it?
He had a real grievance here. He was given a 12-match ban by the SFA. And they say that they gave him this ban to prevent him going to prison, which is funny that they would see that as their role, or maybe they thought they were somehow protecting their guy, but he saw it as prejudicing the case against him. And I guess you could see how the logic in either of those things.
Yeah, there was one point where the Scottish police says they weren't going to investigate because no one had complained about the incident. And then, as described in the book, as a zany publican, Dick Barton wrote a letter to every single police station in Scotland complaining about the incident. But zany publican Dick Barton later felt remorse for doing so and felt guilty for getting Duncan Ferguson banged up and sent him a sex doll in prison, which he was not allowed to receive by the prison services.
He's kind of loaned off to Everton, right? Get away from Scotland. And the author kind of paints a picture that Ferguson very much saw it as a loan and was planning to come back to Rangers.
He played 23 games for Rangers. I mean, just nothing at all. That's what they got out of him for their £4 million, the record transfer ever.
Wow. You know, there's a line in the book, right? It's a quote from some kind of older friend or kind of some kind of older guy. You know, he just wants to play football and live his life, which is such a load of horseshit. Like he goes down to Everton. This is before he goes to prison, and he's caught drink driving through a bus station the night before the Anfield derby while with some random woman in the car. Whatever about the random woman, that's his own business. But like, to say that he just wants to play football and get on with his life is just patently untrue, you know?
Really has a problem with authority and just sticking to the rules. He's a wild man.
This was Joe Royle's first game in charge of Everton. And had Royal known about his drink driving escapades the night before, he wouldn't have put him in the team. And he thought about bringing him off at half time. When he had learned sometime, he learned just before kickoff, I think. But he didn't do anything in the first half and he was about to take him off. But he didn't. And then Ferguson scored and assisted in the second half. And this kind of elevated his status to kind of, you know, put him on a fast track to legendary status amongst the Everton fans. He scored against United shortly afterwards and ripped off his shirt. So he became a hit more for, like, he had big hits, you know. There was some killer, but there was an awful lot of filler with Duncan Ferguson.
Yeah. He was a moments player, right? A moments player.
Yeah. But sorry, going back to the jail stuff, this is really what did for him when it came to actual court. Is he was already on probation for fighting a fella in a pub. He had 3 previous convictions, like for, you know, the fight in the pub. He attacked the fella on crutches at a taxi rank. The guy in the pub was the fisherman that you mentioned before, Al, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
But it was the first time, apparently, that someone went to jail for something that happened on a football field, which, you know, I continue to think is absolutely ridiculous, but it is because of this history that he has.
Well, that's right. And yeah, he was always getting himself in scrapes. Yeah, the fight he had in a pub sounds like the most sordid event that ever happened. He walked in wearing like ladies' clothing for some reason, trying to imitate a teammate. A continental teammate who had the audacity to have an earring. So he decided, well, look at me, I'll wear high heels. And he was with, like, he sounds like a terrible, terrible man. At the time, Duncan Ferguson was 21 and he's with, like, this 48-year-old man, head of a supporters club. The whole thing sounded very sordid.
They went to drink in this place called Anstruther, which is a fishing village. It made no sense for them to be there. Like, they would have went out of their way to go dressed as a effete foreigner in
He just
Anstruther, this
he just wants to
fishing
live his
place.
life and play football, and occasionally don ladies' clothes and fight fishermen. Good old boy.
Yeah.
Oh, another black mark against old Duncan Ferguson. Penalty shootout. Duncan the coward. I
Yes.
can't remember who it was against.
It was against Sunderland.
I mean, yeah, who cares about a penalty against Sunderland of all the teams? I
Was it
think
in
I'd
the
score a
league?
penalty against Sunderland.
Was it against? It was in the League Cup as well, I think.
I think you're right, but he would not take a penalty. Ibrahim Bakayoko had to get out of his tracksuit to take one, and I like one of the other penalty takers, Materazzi. Oh, lovely.
The,
Lovely to see that. There's a man who knows a thing or two about a headbutt, Johnny.
yeah. So, what must have Ferguson thought when there was this statue unveiled outside the Pompidou Stadium of a man headbutting another man in the World Cup final?
But I bet you any money that Zinedine Zidane had not been driving drunk through Liverpool City Centre with a strange woman in his car the night before. So, oh, another fun fact. Oh, this was lovely. Everton go on a pre-season tour to Greece. I think it's Joe Royle announces they're off to the Acropolis. And Duncan Ferguson says, "What a country. The nightclubs are open in the day." That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that is good.
I mean,
That's good.
if that's a deliberate joke, that's funny. And if it's not, he's a dumb fuck.
It's still funny.
Someone says that Duncan Ferguson made Alan Shearer look like Peter Ustinov.
You're always talking about Peter Ustinov.
Came up in the book, mate. I can't help it. Another fun Duncan Ferguson fact, and one I'm happy to tell you that Johnny has got on board with. At one point, Everton, he canvassed Everton supporters as to what tattoo he should get. That's great. And Johnny has agreed to get a tattoo suggested by listeners to the Adamola Bookman podcast. You need two suggestions, what you want him to have and where you want it, and we'll take the best answers for both of them. And he's promised to go through with this.
Yeah, he got a tattoo and then he left shortly afterwards. So they sell Ferguson to Newcastle for
8 mil.
8 million. Everton that is. So the chairman at the time, had launched kind of a crisp line, like a healthier crisp solution, and it failed. So and Everton was running out of money. So they sold Duncan Ferguson right out under the nose of Walter Smith. But actually on that, Walter Smith, just to outline how in the dark he was about this, is he says that his wife knew before he did. And he's just so insulted that his wife, and he's pointing at his wife, she knew. She knew. But anyway, whatever. This guy, Peter Johnson, the chairman, gets rid of Ferguson, and he becomes a bit of a lame duck chairman, and he's gone. So Bill Kenwright sees the opportunity to swoop in there. Kenwright comes in. It's the beginning of the gilded Kenwright era, and then Ferguson is off at Newcastle, where he spends, I think he was there for a year and a half, and he spends most of it lying on a treatment table. And then Kenwright says to Walter Smith, there's only one man who can come back and save this club. The other player that they had in mind was Eidur Gudjohnsen. He would have been better.
A much better pick. Yeah, went on to play for Barcelona. I had a friend growing up who was a Leicester fan, and I went to see Leicester play Newcastle when Ferguson and Shearer started up front. The old big man combo, is always so effective, isn't it? And even, I was 20, I looked it up and I looked at the team. I remember the game. And I remember looking at the team sheet going, they're playing Ferguson and Shearer up front and they don't have any wingers. It was the worst team you've ever seen. They were so bad. Leicester won 2-0. Even my naive little footballer's like, Hullett doesn't know what he's doing here. He really doesn't know what he's doing. It is so bad, this team. And Ferguson was taken off at half-time, of course.
He played against Hullett really early in his career, maybe around the time of the Euro 92. And he came off saying, now there is a player. I am not a football player. He said that Hullett moved like a gazelle across the pitch. It's quite nice, isn't it?
Yeah, that is nice. Yeah, the time
was a total bust.
Yeah. an absolute disaster, and only not the worst spell of his career by not being the Rangers spell of his career, which was even worse. Yeah, he was described as an expensive failure in the book Newcastle United, the day the promises had to stop. Great name. Great name.
Okay, burglars.
I enjoyed this part. 2 incidents, both times it ended badly for the burglar. The second time, this is my favourite. So he's described as like a Scouse drug addict who broke into his house and was stealing like bottles of champagne and whiskey and stuff. Is that right?
Yeah.
And he gets accosted by Duncan Ferguson, and apparently he goes, "Oh, all right, Dad, I'll just put it back. I'll just put it back. Don't worry, no harm done." It doesn't work like that. And then fucking battered him. Oh, I can't help it, get all macho fun in it. It's just the dream, isn't it? Like someone breaks into your house, kids and wife are there. I fucking battered him. Lovely stuff. I'm a hero. I can look after my wife. It doesn't work like that. Oh la la.
But considering that he dedicated an entire chapter to the scissors kick against Germany that was saved, the burglar thing only gets a couple of pages. I was really surprised by that.
I mean, what is there to say? I mean, especially if he's got no input from Duncan Ferguson.
But what is there to say about a scissors kick against the bar?
Well, that's true, but I think he's just trying to impress on us that how good he was.
He could have been.
This goal, he nearly scored. It's so good. It's really bad when you're trying to describe a goal that nearly got scored.
All those burglars went to jail. The second guy, the guy you mentioned, the drug addict guy, he went to jail for 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Both times. So the first time there was 2 guys and one of them escaped, but they caught him later. But both times Ferguson restrained one of the burglars, and the only burglar the second time until the police came. And he broke a bone in his own hand doing so. It must have been serious tussles,
Yeah, it'd been absolutely terrifying. And out for 3 games as well when he was broken bone in his hand.
But can we get on to my favourite part in the entire book?
Yes, we can.
Have you ever heard of a man called Osmo Tapio Everton Rajhala?
I have now, Johnny. Yes, he's a prominent Finnish composer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Have you seen a picture of him?
Yes, I have.
With his suit jacket and his cravat and stuff. I just can't imagine him hanging around with Duncan Ferguson.
Well, I've looked him up in the old days as well when he was a punk, and I can't imagine him hanging around with Duncan Ferguson then either. 2 aspects of the same man, neither of which Duncan Ferguson would have any time for.
This guy, Osmo Tapio Rajhala, is a Finnish composer who wrote an orchestral piece. It took him 10 years to write this orchestral piece, which you can listen to on Spotify. It's quite busy, and it's a musical portrait of Duncan Ferguson. He later renamed it to the apotheosis of underachievement. But this guy is a guy who loves Everton. His name is Everton. He took it up.
First of all, I'm stealing that name from my autobiography, but I'll never be bothered to write it. Secondly, he's quite an unconventional football fan, isn't he? He was one of the few people who met with the author, but one of the conditions of meeting with the author is that the author would not relay to him any of the Everton football scores from that season, because the gentleman is an unusual football supporter in as much as he doesn't support Everton or would pay any attention to it during the season. He can't bear to watch the games or hear the scores as they come in. He just likes to enjoy it from the benefit of hindsight. It's pretty weird, isn't it, Johnny?
He was a member of all these boards or forums, and it was causing him so much distress that he logs off from the months of August until May.
I mean, I've walked out the last 5 minutes of injury time or something if it's particularly grueling, but I've never just clocked out of the whole season.
But my favourite bit was this, and credit to the author for this story. So he travels to Finland, to Helsinki, to meet Rajhala, and he's lucky because Rajhala's wife is second violin in the Helsinki Philharmonic, and they're playing like he's invited to go along, and they're playing The Planets by Gustav Holst, who was British. I didn't know that. Not that I know anything about Gustav Holst. And the wife, this violinist, said, "Well, it's a bit unfortunate. This would be a bit like a Finn going abroad and hearing Sibelius's Finlandia."
I know, Johnny, you can't fucking move in England without people playing Gustav Holst The Planets. Like everywhere you go, like, oh, enough, bloody Mercury already. I don't know much about classical music, Johnny, but I do know about this, and it's good. It's good stuff. Like The Planets is good. It's good.
Okay. Is it
No,
as good as Finlandia by Sibelius?
well, maybe it's my patriotism, Johnny. It's better than Finlandia, because it's got a bigger, broader picture. Not just Finland, it's everything, all the planets.
Well, I was too busy listening to the apotheosis of underachievement, but I guess I'll move on to Holst next. Okay.
Yeah, I also listened to the composer's punk music as well. Fucking hell, you could get away with anything in the old days, couldn't you? Like you really could. Just get a guitar and just shunter over it. Late 70s, early 80s, that was enough. I also think, Johnny, with the greatest respect, having listened to his composition about Duncan Ferguson, if I had an orchestra at my disposal, I could probably do that. Just go, you go, boom, 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 boom. It's fucking bollocks. I really did think it was nonsense. I mean, it did sound like someone who was mental. So, I mean, if that's what he's trying to get into Ferguson's mind.
Yeah, it sounded very, very busy. Loads of like noise and then quiet moments. It was bad. It was bad.
I thought it was bad. I think it's a fun little story.
That's a great story.
And the funnest part of the story, Johnny, was that in its very first ever performance was the same night that Duncan Ferguson had come back from like 9 months off and he scored the winner against Man United. How about that?
That was a nice little coincidence. And then I was just, I expected him to say Ferguson at some point travelled to Helsinki to hear the music. But then, did you think he cares much about it?
A big classical music guy. What sort of music do you think Duncan Ferguson listens to? I'm putting you on the spot there.
I'd say
nowhere to hold him, nowhere to walk away, nowhere to run. I bet he listens to stuff like that. Shitty country music. I bet he's got a pair of cowboy boots, Duncan Ferguson.
Okay. Yeah, that was the year Everton finished fourth, and there was that whole debacle with Liverpool in the Champions League spot. But anyway, they lost the qualifier to Villarreal, and a Ferguson goal was unjustly disallowed by Pierluigi Collina, who then retired a couple of days later for no apparent reason after saying he was the best ref in the world.
Do you believe the conspiracy that the author believes that Collina somehow contrived to keep 5 English teams out of Europe?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, 100%.
Why not?
Yeah.
Why not? And then he finished his career with a missed penalty against West Brom. He was kept on for a year after that, even though at this point Moyes had told him that he was the 6th choice striker for the club. But he was kept on for a year when they qualified for the Champions League. But then he was playing less and less. And his last goal was a missed penalty against West Brom, saved by Thomas Kuszczak. But then he slotted home the follow-up. But that was the end of Duncan.
Yeah, very unconvincing as well. Like, I watched that penalty from 2 different angles, recording on people's phones. But yeah, he really does scuff it in. He's so lucky it goes in. It's a terrible penalty.
Yeah, well, he says he had cramp in both legs, but I think he was just knackered at that stage. And Moyes didn't keep him on, and Ferguson just refused to shake his hand until 5 years later when he returned to apologise.
And he wanted a job.
One thing that we didn't mention is the name Duncan Disorderly, which I quite enjoyed. Had you heard that before?
Oh, yes, of course, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a good one. But yeah, that came around very early in his career. So he was tainted right from the get-go. Yeah. He never stood a chance.
Someone told the author of this book when he was writing, he was like, yeah, good luck with that, buddy. Duncan Ferguson didn't even interview for his own official DVD, which Wayne Rooney interviewed for, but not Duncan.
Yeah, there's a whole thing about this legendary interview he does with a journalist about his mitre boots. And it's like, wait, he repeats it all. It's all there. And he's like, what are you looking forward to in the new season? Playing in my mitre boots. See,
What
he's not playing ball at all.
what do you want to do with the rest of your life? I just want to wear a mitre. So last week we did the prison draft. Had you heard of Tony Kay, who went to jail for a £10 bet he put on a match? Or Mark Ward, both of whom
No, I'd never heard of
played
him.
for
But yeah,
Everton.
apparently, yeah, huge name and would have played for England had he not been in jail.
That Tony Kay story is sad. So he was playing for Wednesday. So he was inducted into the Everton Hall of Fame the same night as Ferguson. But he had been signed from Sheffield Wednesday, and he had put a tenner bet on Wednesday to lose a game, which he got man of the match in. And then he was banned from. He had signed for Everton. By the time the whole process had finished, as in the legal process, I think he'd won the league with Everton. Maybe, yeah, he had. And he was banned from football for the rest of his life, and he went to prison. And then another Everton player called Mark Ward went to jail for cocaine possession. He got 8 years. And also, sorry, I just these fellas were kind of milling around this hall the night he was inducted to the Hall of Fame. And Howard Kendall was just staggering around drunk as a skunk. Howard Kendall's alcoholism comes up in an awful lot of books.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, they say the organisers of the event were worried Howard Kendall was taking it over. He had a bunch of anecdotes and he was just spitting them out. And it's like, this is actually Duncan's night. But for once, Duncan Ferguson does actually talk to the fans and sounds really emotional and quite pleasant. As he's
Yeah.
being honoured by paying customers. Yeah, so well he might.
Yeah, 800 people had shown up to induct him into this Hall of Fame, so he took it upon himself to stand up and speak for 50 seconds or something. But that's it, kind of it, right? He comes back later to Everton when he wants a job, and he did subsequently post this book. He was caretaker manager of Everton twice.
Yeah, he was. And he was assistant to
Ancelotti.
Ancelotti. Yeah, he was assistant to Ancelotti, which seems far-fetched, doesn't it, frankly?
Wow.
And he has subsequently managed, right? He was Forest Green Rovers manager, did terribly, and then he managed in Scotland and also did terribly, probably because he really hates football.
Yeah, and he's one of those instinctive players who someone says at some stage in the book is really hard to coach and are often bad coaches. Your Glenn Hoddles.
Yeah, I can't imagine he's a good coach, and the evidence would suggest he's not.
But that's it. That's Duncan Ferguson. He was chasing Ferguson. Do you think that he found him?
No, he didn't. He didn't. Yeah, the book ends with him saying, I'm just shy. And I think that's a very generous assessment.
Yeah, I really didn't like Duncan Ferguson.
No, and I don't think you'd like him in real life either. I think in real life he would just not be a very nice person.
You know, recently when United played against Everton, it was 2-2. But Ferguson was a pundit. He was an analyst. And I hadn't read this book at the point, so I didn't realise that it was such a big deal that he was on TV like that.
Oh, really? Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know that. Yeah, I guess that is a big deal.
Well, I'm sure it's a big deal to Alan Patullo.
Yeah, no kidding. How did you like the book?
The book was okay. I think because I didn't like Ferguson, it did drag a bit. But I thought it was well written. I thought he made a bit of a virtue out of the fact that he couldn't get close to him in a way that would say that Guillaume Balaguer wasn't able to do that with the books where he couldn't get close to Messi and Ronaldo. I thought he created a character. There was a Ferguson character in the book, which I thought was reasonably complete for a fella that he never got close to. So I think he did well there. And I enjoyed his writing style. And I just say he's a sniveling weasel just because he loves Ferguson so much and there's so little to love. But I think it was a decent book. I would give this 2.5 pigeons or headbutts to the face, whatever you want, out of 5.
Oh, I think it's better than that. I think it's a 7 out of 10 book. I enjoyed it very much. I thought it was nice. I like the author's tone. As you say, yeah, Ferguson is an elusive and unpleasant character, but I think he fills in the world with the other people quite successfully. And there's some good stories in there. I learned things and I liked it. 3.5 3 headbutts and the headbutt he gave to Josh McStay, which was half a headbutt. 3.5 headbutts out of 5.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll give it 5 Jock McStay headbutts, which is equal to 2.5 headbutts in real life.
All right.
But honestly, I cannot think of a player with that status who was A, so mediocre, and B, so disinterested. I just cannot think of a player who's reached that level by putting in such a kind of a crappy shift.
In 2 weeks' time, we are going to be doing The Rebel Who Would Be King, the Eric Cantona story, written by Philippe Auclair, podcasting royalty.
Yeah, and Philippe Auclair is not just podcasting royalty. He recorded 5 singles and 3 albums.
Oh, no kidding. All right. Well, anyway, so this is exciting. So next week, The Rebel Who Would Be King, the Eric Cantona story by Philippe Auclair. I mean, I guess you know more about Cantona than me. I mean, I know the United stuff, but anything before, it's only bits and pieces. So I'm excited to do that. One of the all-timers there, Johnny A. Old Eric. One of the all-timers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, okay. Well, thank you very much, Al. Thanks, as always, to Dara for the music. We have a draft next week and then Cantona the week thereafter.
Thanks very much, folks, and we'll see you next time.
Cheers, buddy.
Let your body spin like there is nothing in life but dancing.